In this video, I show you how I work through the respray and layers of reupholstery to give this tired chair a new lease of life.
Hello, welcome to Croft House. I'm going to be working on this little Lloyd Loom style chair. We're going to completely respray it and change the upholstery. Now I've had a good look at it and I'm pretty sure this is the original paintwork, but not the original upholstery because it has nails in it. If I look underneath, it's been sprayed gold, the same as the chair entirely. Now the upholstery is really sound and it's an awful shame to remove it all. Now, it would be great if I could just leave this Hessian on here and respray it, but I'm not sure what another layer of spray paint would do to it. And it's also split along the top. There was obviously a weak thread in there and that's gone. And I don't think I'd feel comfortable just leaving it. So I'm going to strip it down bit by bit and then have a rethink. Quick recap on tools in case you've not seen any of my other videos. I use a two-pronged tack lifter to hoik the tacks out, and a mallet to give it a helping hand, and a pair of pliers for the stubborn ones that need a bit of an extra pull. This is a four-pronged staple lifter, but I think it's very unlikely I'll find any staples in there, so probably I won't need to use that one. So the first thing we do is remove this piece of tassel gimp. And be very careful, whatever you do, that you don't damage any wood or anything that's going to be seen, for sure. If you can get under them, and then someone's really gone to town on getting these in here. So when you come back on with your tool, be careful that you're not damaging any wood. I mean, this is going to be resprayed, so it's not quite so important, but we still don't want to dent and damage anything. Yeah, those are good long nails. They're not even tacks. Okay. Interesting thing about upholstery is you're never quite sure what you're going to find until you get into it. And this is where my little pliers come in really useful, because I don't want to damage what's going to be seen, because I actually quite like to not come back that far. There's no need for that to come across there. Ah, got it. And bent as well to make things even more difficult. So yeah, we'll take a look at that at the end and continue with these. So I've come along to the end here and I'm actually ripping it because these nails are such a nightmare to get out. I'm just going to leave it and do it when I take the top cover off, because it's all about time, really. What looks like a very simple quick lift chair could turn out not to be. So that's got that off. And then the next thing is to remove the front, and the sides are all nailed as well on the gimp. If you can see around the edges and here. So I'm going to continue taking all these nails out, and then we'll take a look at what's inside. I just want to give you a quick look at how different it is to get tacks out, because I think this is the original. Looking underneath, there are very few nail holes in here, and then somebody's changed the gimp on it, because I don't think an upholsterer would ever nail gimp onto a chair. So these are proper upholstery tacks. Couple of round hits and they're out. That's simple. Okay, so that's the difference between using a tack and a nail. Now I've completely removed the cover. Be careful when you're going around, you don't go through the wicker. It's quite a narrow little gap here to get your tools into. So underneath we've got this black felt wadding, and it's perfectly shaped to fit this chair, and it was very comfortable before, and I like to recycle. So I'm going to try to take this off in one piece and put it back. You could replace it with a piece of foam. You could get another piece of this wadding. If you have an upholsterer nearby, he might sell you a little piece of it. But you know, if you're just doing this as a one-off, it's not always easy to get hold of these materials. So if you can save them and put them back, all well and good. And when I do, I will put a cover of either linterfelt, cotton wadding, or Dacron polyester wadding on it. So let's take this off first. I'm going to use the cover to help me keep it in place very carefully, because the black is actually in some pieces. So I get right to the end, lift that off. A couple of little bits left behind, but we can pack those in. It ends up being a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. Now this is quite interesting. There's some kind of fibre, thick fibre, that's put here just to wad this out. And then the hessian. Now the reason this hessian has split is because they've joined it, and this will have been done because the upholsterer will have had a couple of small bits and he's put them together to use them, basically. But unfortunately, where that join is, they've gone, so this is going to have to be replaced. So I can take this back and see if I can get this off. If not, I'll take the whole lot off and then think about what I do to put something back in its place. Our upholsterer's license. It's quite interesting that the spray has actually gone across here, it's over here. So I'm thinking this must have been sprayed a second time, not when it was left the manufacturers, because why would they spray it with the covers on? You do it, you know, when it was just in its basic chair form before you put any upholstery on it. So exactly the same way, the same tools, hook it all off, and then we'll spray it. Quick close up here, you can see that the seat was obviously put on before the chair was fixed in place. Also have a closer look of where this join just hasn't worked. If that wasn't there, we probably could have kept the base. I've taken this wadding off completely because it's actually really mucky. And I'll probably just put some linterfelt back in its place. So the hessian's off, I've released these little edges, and the next thing you can do is give it a clean. There's, oh, I don't know, however many years of muck in here. This was her grandmother's, so it's quite old. I don't know exactly. So get in all the little nooks and crevices, turn it upside down, give it a bash, get it as clean as you can get a brush in there. And then it's spraying the wood. Now ideally we'll give it all a little bit of a rub. I can sand the wood, okay, but the wicker will be a little bit more tricky, but I will give it a little rough up with something. Now the paint I'm using is a Plasticoat spray. It's the multi-purpose satin. We went for a grey beige because the next colour up was a brown and quite a bit darker, and there's not so many colours to choose from on this. The paint chart came up a lot darker, a little bit more beigea. This actually is very close, the plastic on the lid, to the colour that it's sprayed, but it is a grey. Now, this was the fabric that the customer chose, and it's definitely more brown. could be okay as a contrast. And I have a little bit of gimp that I can use in between that kind of ties them together a little bit more. But I'm going to go back to her and see what she says. I mean, you could go forever buying cans of paint and trying them out. So we'll see if she wants to change her fabric, or if she really finds this too grey, then I'll have to go for a beige. But I do feel with this chair it would look much better in a lighter colour, because it's such a little chair and it kind of throws quite a lot of shadows inside. So the next step is to give it a little rub down and then spray it. I've now completely finished all the rubbing down on the chair. I've used a wire brush for the wicker. Don't be too hard, you don't want to damage the wicker, just try and get into the paint a little bit. This is really, really tough paint, so I haven't got very far, but I can just see some marks on it where I've been. For the wood, just ordinary fine grade sandpaper all over. Okay, we then need to get the dust off, because any speck will make a lump on your final paint. If you can't get in, give it a good blow. And then the final thing I did was wipe it down with washing up liquid and a cloth. Now, if it's a really grubby, grimy piece, you could use a half mess, half white spirit, and that kind of gets into the grease, but this has just been a bedroom chair and barely used, I think, so I felt the washing up liquid was enough. You could use flash liquid, that's also very, very good at getting grime off, probably better than the fairy liquid actually. We decided, do you remember we were going for the warm grey, I think it was, and we decided to go for a cappuccino because this matched the customer's decor better. Now, the paint has to be sprayed between 10 and 20 degrees, I can't remember if I said that before, and it's winter here and it suddenly went to 0 degrees and below. So I've had to wait for the weather to warm up. Unfortunately, it's now quite wet and a little bit windy, so I'm going to go and find a shed to spray this in. Okay, so that will be our next job. The chair's set up, ready for spraying, and I'm going to do the bottom first. It's in the hopes that I can then turn it upside down, or the right way up, and do it the other way. And the first thing I have to do is shake the can for a minute. Second time you shake the can, well, you shake the can every minute for 10 seconds. It's a good idea to wear a mask. And spray lightly. You can come back and repeat your layers, but it's best to start spraying lightly from about a foot away. Okay. You don't want to put it on too thickly because you'll get drips. And that is something you really don't want. Okay, and I'm just going to continue with that until I can't go anymore, and then I will turn it over. Now I've virtually done the top. I just want to show you the action that I use on the side, because the can needs to be held upright. So I'm taking the side to side, and the wicker will definitely need a few more coats. But that's fine, because I would much rather just build up, even if I have to do it 3 times, than have thick paint that's going to drip. Okay, so that wasn't as difficult as I expected. Springs are really good to get hold of, probably worth leaving them till last if you're going to spray them. And then we just continue. I think I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. So So again, side to side is the best way to do it. I want to just show you how it comes up on the back. We've got to do it in one big lump. So I'm doing it one kind of spray across. You have to be careful that you're not going to get a big lump each side. So there is more spray here, so I need to be really careful with that. And if that starts to build up, then just leave it for a little while. Okay? Continue another piece. Okay, so that's one can, one coat, as I'm really quite happy with that. I bought 3 cans, and the next 2 will go on much easier, or look better when we're filling the gaps really. But again, try and give it 2 really good coats, and then the 3rd one just making it stronger, I guess, finishing it off. So we're now on day 2, and you can see, if we zoom in, that it's quite patchy. That's 1 can of paint that's done the whole chair. So I'm now going to do the 2nd coat, and we'll see how that looks tomorrow. Okay, so 2nd coat is now on. It's definitely looking better. And we'll just come back tomorrow and see if it needs a 3rd coat, which I think it will. I think I'd feel more confident that the paintwork would have survived better with a 3rd coat. Painting is now finished. It's gone really, really well. 3 coats. There were a couple of little bits I've missed. When I got it into the daylight, I could see much clearer than when it was in the barn. So a couple of little missed bits, really, really faint, but just kind of in where the joints were, and a little run on the underside. So I just rubbed that down with a little bit of fine sandpaper, and that rubbed really easily. So a good tip is not to use all your paint. It's very tempting to use it all up, but keep a little bit, because you might find later that you need an extra bit. Okay, so the next thing is to start building up the seat. The first thing I'm going to do is use some black cotton base lining. It's fire retardant. If a chair is younger than 1950, you have to use fire retardant fabrics. If it's older, in UK, you don't. However, a fire is a fire, so entirely up to you. I much prefer to be safe and use fire retardant fabrics. So with this, I'm going to measure and cut a piece that just sits from the back to the top, because I don't want lots of bulky layers. You need to cut it bigger to hang on to pull, and the same across. Okay, and then afterwards you can trim it. The next thing I will do is put a layer of hessian. The purpose of the black cotton is cosmetic, but it also helps to catch all the dust and the bits that come off the hessian and might come through wadding if you're using wadding. The hessian is much firmer, and that will, you pull it quite tight and it will hold all the lining in place, and yeah, just helps firm up the seat really. Also, I buy fire retardant, as you can see, in bulk, but you don't have to buy it in bulk. Now, to measure for the hessian, I'm bending the ends over because it makes a firmer base for to put the tacks and the staples into. It won't pull away. So we measure from the back and the front. I want to layer my fabrics, and there'll be 3 with the black, the hessian and the top cover. The top cover I want to have a nice crisp line along here. So I can either take the Hessian right under and staple it at the back, but I think I would prefer just to finish it on here. I'll just see how I go. When I put the wadding on, that will sort of smooth over a little bit, but I don't want a big thick wedge along here, so I might take the Hessian right over. So measure to come under and give yourself a fold, and then the same. And when I cut, I just cut in a square and then trim it. And the only tools you need, I use a long ruler, some big sharp scissors, and some tailor's chalk. Well, mine's a little bit small now, well worn. Okay, so we'll just, I'll cut those out and then show you how I fix it. So looking down on the seat, this is the base cover. Get it even, the sides, and enough on the back to hang on to. And then, as always, I'm working a couple of staples in the back, couple in the front, either side, and then fill in. So let's do this. Actually quite tricky to get this staple into a little space, but we need to get started. So there's a couple in there. Okay, so there's a couple at the back. I don't want to over tighten it so it pulls all in those springs. So I'm just going to smooth it, lay it down. A bit more to go on this side. And I'm going quite close to that back edge. And then a couple on the sides. Luckily the springs do go down fairly well. Okay. And there's metal bits here, so again you've got to be careful that you miss the spring bases. Okay. Push down and get in there. So things to think about here is how you get those in, not damaging this wood. So I don't want to be pushing, wicker. I don't want to be pushing too much against the wicker. So I don't know if you can see here, that's really as close as I can get. So the Hessian, again, we'll probably have to line up fairly close to those. And if all else fails, as I say, I will use tacks. But I can now continue and just a few either side until we go all the way around, and then we can trim it. They don't have to, on this base cloth, be too close together, the staples or the tacks, whatever you're using. Okay, so a couple of other tools, some little pliers, and this is a 4-pronged staple lifter to hook under, just in case one gets in the way. If you heard the hissing, it's because my staple gun is attached to a compressor. It gives you more power. You can get electric staple guns and you can just get a hand staple gun, but with this chair you'd have a job, I think, to get in. The nice thing about this is it has got quite, you can see, a point on it here, so I can actually get down quite well with it. But that's your choice. Not everybody wants a compressor in their kitchen. I'm working in a small space at home. Okay, so I've gone all the way around now, and I actually found the easiest way to do it was to hold the staple gun almost at a sideways angle. As I say, it's just trial and error. You can then go around, feel if there's anything sticking up, and if there is, you can just give it a tap with a hammer and bradawl. Again, really careful that you don't go through that wicker, so you have to be really careful at all times. Think wicker. Okay, and then trim it or not. And actually I'm probably not going to trim this too much because the Hessian is going to go over the top. I'm going to just take the corners off a little bit Okay, and really that's all I need to do. I might go and just trim this front one a little bit. It's quite long. As I say, when I put the hessian on, I will endeavour to fold these little corners just this way and then pull that back like that, and then the hessian, as I say, will just sit on top and hide that. And again, it gives a little bit more body, a little bit more padding, if you like, on here, because there won't be any wadding on that piece of wood, because right at the end we will be sticking a piece of braid over it. Exactly the same way, except this time we're going to fold down. Now, because of that, I will cut these corners off a little bit beforehand. Okay. So once I'm happy that I've got that where I want it, and that I'm going to have enough to fold under, I'm just going to mark with my tailor's chalk the curve of where the chair is, the wood hits the wicker. Okay, that's it. And then that gives me a better idea of where to cut it, and you can just follow the edge from here, give yourself enough of a turn. Okay, makes life a little bit easier. Well, actually I'm turning it over because it's not going to be seen, but it's easier, I think, for you and for I to do it this way. So make sure your bottom cloth is turned down, and then the hessian comes near to the back of the chair, and then we can exactly the same, but this time you're just going to be folding in and pleating these corners. Make sure you've got your bottom cloth pulled right back against those staples. Okay, and actually with this way up you can really see what you do much easier, and continue all the way around. So a few more staples on here than you did with the bottom cloth. Okay, keep that pulled under, and away we go. Okay, for the front, I decided that I would just pull it over. You can see along the top where these big nail holes are, and that's where the hessian was originally. So I've got 3 in already, and the sides will go under these bits of wicker on the sides. Okay, so just pull that down, smooth it nicely and firmly over the springs, and then just continue exactly the same way as before, keeping your bottom lining out of the way, and we can just stretch that over quite firmly. It's not going to go anywhere because the springs are all here, but we still want to keep things fairly firmly. So again, not right to the edge. Whoops. And then just continue stapling and same the other side, and continue bit by bit, step by step, and then I'll show you when I finish. I've gone all the way around now, pleating. We'll take a closer look in a minute, but pleated around the corners. And at the front I've just trimmed the corners because they're going to sit under this base here. Okay, I've trimmed this bit from the front. Continue with this along the edge. And then the side, just finish that off. And then I can just staple this bit down here back together. Okay, and that's it, ready for the wadding. Okay, so you can see here how I've pleated these in along the side. It probably doesn't look terribly neat, but as I say, it's quite awkward to get in between the wicker and the little bit of wood. We just pull together, mitre up and cut off, okay? And then they fold down quite neatly. It's just so that we don't get too much bulk in here under this bit of wood. So everything, when it's finished, sort of sits quite evenly along that front edge. And then just go around as you did with the base cover and just check that everything is in, and if not, give it a little hammer and bradawl. I've now put the black felt padding back on. You can buy a new piece, just black felt wadding. I put it back. I like to recycle. You'll see in my videos that I do try and recycle as much as possible. It's quite interesting. I said earlier that there's a saying that everything that comes from the upholsterer's floor goes into a chair. It's nearly correct with this one. This is a real patchwork of bits and pieces. However, the patchwork, or the jigsaw if you like, has gone back quite well. So I'm just going to stick with this. It also saves having to buy another big piece of wadding. You could use foam. You'd need to use blue seating foam or white, which is a little bit softer, but I think you'll generally, if you go to markets or haberdashery stores, you'd find the blue seating foam, usually in squares. Now, I wouldn't go less than 1.5 inches on this chair because you want a nice bit of padding there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is cut out some white felt wadding, linter felt, to put over the top to smooth that all down. Now I buy my white cotton wadding, linter felt, on a big roll because I use a lot of it. There are 2 thicknesses, and this is the thicker, and it obviously gives a little bit more wadding. You can also get a very thin layer that comes between 2 of these white fleece backings, and they call it skin wadding. It's quite useful if you're just wanting a little bit on the back of a chair, just to give a little bit of padding. So we can just rip this apart. So let's just take a look at that. The width of this is 65. It stretches quite a bit. What I've done on the chair, I've just literally measured side to side and back to front and gone over a tiny bit because we can manipulate it a little bit. I just want a soft edge coming over the chair. So that's fine for my width, and then for my length, and then for my width we're going 43. So then all you do is pull it apart. I think I said I'll cut it out later. There's no cutting with the felt. We just rip it. Okay. And then we can pull it to shape on the chair. What I should have said was the fleece that comes off the back of the linter felt is really good if you're a gardener for protecting your plants. Right, so the linter felt is just placed on the back. We need to bear in mind that we've still got to get the top cover on. We've got to nail it in, and I want to put a piece of braid along the side. So we've got to keep everything in kind of quite tightly. Make sure with this on the top you can bring in your sides a bit because this can come over then. Okay, that's good. and then you can feel here if there's any lumps and bumps under there that it starts to pack them out. So that's giving me a nice finish. And then again, as you did before, you can just pull off the corners, just rip so easily. It's really good to work with this. And then you can just smooth it down over there. We don't really want any more bulk going down the side, so just taken to the back and feathered almost. Because with the linter felt you can just pull it like this and feather the edges, okay, so they sit quite smoothly on there. And then you're going to get your fabric down there, hopefully your tacks in, and all will be well. Okay. See, this originally on the front edge they had this piece of wadding, but I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to feather down the linter felt. Now, I mean, there's plenty here because this was the total width of the linter felt. So I'm going to go to about probably a third of the way down this piece of wood and then pull that off. Okay. Check your corners. I'm going to pull a little bit off those because I want it just to smooth over this edge like this, just onto it really, to cover up these lumpy bits that are under here. And then, because as I said before, I want to keep that bottom edge really nice and crisp, sharp for the fabric to sit on. So you can just continue feathering until you've got what you feel you need on there. What I should have said to you, and it's a good tip anyway, if you feel you've got lumps and bumps underneath, and this is on any upholstery, you can pack it with bits of linter felt because you can make it thick, you can feather it out. And the good thing about the thicker linter felt is that you can separate it and stretch it and make it as fine as you like, or pack it. So it's just a really useful material to use. Now, measuring for the top cover, I'm going to give it a good extra bit to hang on to, but we need to make sure that it's going to go right down to that piece of wood. It's gone beyond the piece of wood. And then I'm taking it over and up the other side. Now you have to decide on your chair where you want your fabric to finish. You might decide you want to fold on it. As I'm using braid, I may even put a piece of braid underneath just to tidy that end if it's just a cut end, or you can fold it under. So make sure you have enough. You know, it's going to pull down, but you've got to get hold of it. You've got to have enough to go under there. Take your measurement, and then exactly the same the other side. Go from the widest bit, get enough to hang on to, measure down that side, measure down that side, and then you can cut your square of fabric. Right, now as I say, I always mark the top. This is a kind of velour, a woven velour, but check, because if it has a pile on it, the pile wants to run towards the front. Okay. A quick rundown on tacks. We will be using the 10mm to fix the top cover to the chair. 13mm are used for attaching webbing, and the 16mm are for attaching the springs to a chair with a heavy duty lashing cord. Now I've temporary tacked at the back and just under at the front. When I say temporary tack, that means just putting the tack in halfway. And the reason for that is if it's in the right place at the end, we can hammer it right in, and if it's not, we can move it and get it out really easily. And that's very easy with tacks to do that. It's just going to hold everything in place until you're absolutely sure, and then you can hammer it home. Make sure your fabric is running symmetrically, or as you want it on the chair, sitting level. So I put one at the back, a little bit fiddly but not too bad. And if I just turn the chair over, if you can see, I've just got one underneath temporarily tacked here. so it's kind of round the other side of the chair. The wadding back, and then the next thing I'm going to do is just to put 2 in either side, that piece of wood, and then I can just, because these tacks are very, very sharp, so I can just get the point of the tack into the wood, put my bradawl on it, where are you here, and hammer that into a temporary tacking position. So make sure you're pulling everything firmly, get your fabric nice and tight either way, because all the wadding over time it gets sat on and gets squashed a bit, so then the fabric, top fabric, like clothes, you know, when you kneel on a pair of jeans, fabric gives a little bit. So get it as firm as you can, not, you know, so stretched that it's pulling on the tacks, and you wouldn't be able to probably with a chair like this, but just as firm as you can, okay? Now I've come all the way round, just got the last bit to do. And I found for me, because I don't have nice neat little fingers, the best way to get into this deep narrow ravine is to pull back on your wadding and find your wooden plinth, and then use a magnetic hammer. This is one of the best things you will have as an upholsterer. It's just hanging on to that tack, and then you can just take your tack in there, hang on to it with your bradawl, and you're in. So let's just take a look at what's happening underneath the chair. You can see I'm just literally tacking it to the underside, and then I'm going to put a bit of this gimp over the top, which you'll see as we go along, just to cover the cut edge. So you need to be smoothing everything up right from the back of the chair to the front and outwards to the sides as you go along. Okay, so at this point I've come right the way along as far as I can, not exactly in the corner, but probably one tack away. And I'm now going to hammer in all the tacks fully. I'm going to get my tacks in, make sure everything looks good, and then I'm going to start to trim the edges and then fold in these corners. Now I've come to the corner, and all you do is continue around. The gimp will follow down, but we need to make sure the tacks are going to be hidden. So you just follow the line of tacks down, smoothing, pulling right the way round to the underside and fix at the back. Now the next thing we're doing is trimming the edge. Go almost to the bottom where the wood is on the chair. You can leave a little bit because we can tuck it back, or we can tuck it down. There's a slight gap between the wooden plinth that we're tacking into and the edge of the chair. And we need to be a little bit careful because where the metal springs are, we haven't been able to put a tack in here. So you will need the sharpest scissors that you've got with really, really sharp ends, because you're sort of digging into that, and just go around very carefully. Be very careful that you're only cutting the right thing. You need a good light and a good sharp pair of scissors, and really that's all you need. You look along the edge, you can see I've come down quite low on this. Yeah, don't worry if it seems a little bit high. I have this lovely tool called a regulator, and it has a flat end and a point, and it has many uses, but one of them on here, we will be able to just tuck that end in between the wicker and the wood of the chair. If you don't have a regulator, you could use a knife or a screwdriver, but because this has this pointed end as well. If the flat end doesn't go, then we've got the point to poke in the little bits of detail. Once we've come around this joint, we've then got to cut into where this corner bit is to get it round. Now you need to make sure everything's pulled smoothly to where you want it, and then all you do is cut down to where that joint is, okay, and so that you can pull your fabric around. Now you can cut right directly to it because the gimp is going to cover that, and then you've got two options. You can either finish your gimp here underneath, and I would put a little gimp pin. It's a tiny tack, they come in different colours, just to neaten that up. Or, and I think this is what I will do, is take it right round the corner. Okay, so you're still not going to see this sharp edge. You can fold under, and this is pretty standard on all upholstery, if you want to neaten a joint that's going round a leg. Okay, you fold both sides under, so the top and the bottom, and then that will sit around there really neatly and tidily. Okay, now if we take a look at the underside, and as I said, if you want just to neaten the corner, you just fold that piece under and come around, and you've got a nice neat edge. Because I'm going to take the braid right round the gimp, because I'm going to put it along this edge and I can cover it, what I've done is just cut into the corner where I'm going to cut the fabric off along the bottom. So this is another use for your regulator. It's really handy to be able to find the point. So I can come along here, mark where I want my cut, poke that regulator through there, and you can either cut to the regulator or you've got a hole to cut to. Okay, quick look at the underside now. You can see how I've just pulled that round and cut it off. Oh, and the alternative, if you don't want to take your braid around, you fold under these edges, and then if you've got an end here, you literally just fold it on like that. But then you would have to tack into it or staple into it, so you would see those. The good thing about this is you don't have to. And now the fun and the easy bit is to attach the gimp. And I'm just going to go literally on this underside from one end to the other, and just have it so that it covers the tacks and the raw edge. I always use Yoo-hoo glue. I've been using this for 32 years and I've never had any comebacks from it. And I always put the glue on the gimp rather than the chair, a little bit safer. So you just put like a small piece to start with, okay, just enough. You need enough that it's going to stick and cover everything, but just to get going, okay. And that then just covers that up. So I've just glued my second piece, and I don't take a piece longer really than this, probably about 6 inches, and then just do it stage by stage because it takes a little while to dry. So keep pressing down and then continuing along. Okay, don't worry if some threads stick out, because you can poke those in under the glue afterwards. So we can just push those little ends under. Again, the regulator, yet another use for it. And then just continue, and that bit's really sticking well already. So by the time you get to the end, you've got a really nice neat edge coming along there. So now we're going to go around the edge, and we're going to fold the braid over and fix it. But what we can do, and I'm going to use this little gimp pin, it's kind of back tack it. So you go through on the underside of it, give yourself enough that gimp's not going to fray. Set it in place, okay, and then you can hammer it in. And actually on this side you're not going to see it, but if you had a gimp pin that was going to be seen on the top, you need to cover it with a bit of fabric before you hammer it, because the paint will come off. As I say, you can get these white, beige, green, all sorts of different colours, but because we're not going to see that one, it's going to be inside. It doesn't matter too much, mind your wood, and then we can just glue that down into place. So I just want to show you the gimp pin here. You can, I won't pick it up because you'll disappear in my fingers, but this is the 10mm tack that I used for the top cover, and this little tiny gimp pin, and you can get them in different colours. This one's just a beige, as you can see, but I use those on the end of the gimp just to hold it in place, and they're so neat. I've come around the side now, and the next thing is just to take the braid right round the seat, exactly the same, just with the yoo-hoo. Be very careful with your glue, use an old piece, and if you're gluing onto the gimp, you know, you're gluing on top of the old bit so you're not going to hurt, and just take it down as carefully as you can. And if you're going to wipe it anywhere, wipe it this side, because you can wipe it off the wicker, but you should just be able to carefully lay that down inside and continue around. So that's all on there now, and we just come around to the front, take this edge over, and I'll show you what to do underneath. Okay, so we come over and glue this down here, and then when you get to the end, leave yourself enough to turn under, and then you can trim that off. And fold under here. Now, once you've got your end and you fold it over so you know exactly where you want it to sit, then you can put your little tiny gimp pin right inside that fold. Glue your final bit of braid. Okay. Fold down, glue up, your gimp pin so it's underneath, and you can just hammer that in. Okay, and that's finished, and you can't even see that gimp pin, so it could have been any colour. And that's it. So the chair is now finished. A little bit fiddly, but well worth it. I think it looks much more fashionable now. It's been sprayed in a colour that's going to match the customer's decor and given a new lease of life with the seat. I hope you found this little tutorial useful. If you'd like to see more videos on reupholstery or soft furnishings, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next video, and good luck with your projects.